Okay. So basically, if you're preparing for AZ 305 and you have reached a point where you are understanding what an Azure batch is, and you're trying to understand how it works and decide what what are the best practices for Azure batches, to make it a clear distinction between an Azure virtual machine and Azure batch. If you even go through the documentation, what it will say is that an Azure virtual machine is the infrastructure as a service component of Azure, and batch service is going to be a platform as a service component of Azure. Okay. Why do they say that? The reason for it is that in a virtual machine, you are the one who is going to create the virtual machine. You are kind of deciding what and how the things are going to be for in a virtual machine. Azure batch, it does allow you to do certain things to an extent where you would be creating a pool and you would be creating nodes and you would be deciding what the pool is going to be, but it is still going to be very much in a way that it's cloud controlled. Okay. So if you understand in a way is that in virtual machines you are creating virtual machines. Okay. If you want to run a job, you are sending it out to those virtual machines and you are the one who's going to be doing it. In Azure batch, a pool is internally a virtual machine. So if you create a pool, you are basically creating virtual machines and then you are adding nodes to it, but that's more managed by cloud than by you. Okay. So if we go by understanding the main components of Azure batch, there are four things that are considered as the main components of Azure batch. First is your pool, second is jobs, task, and then the node. Okay. So a pool is basically, it's going to be it's in a way it is like the virtual machine scale set. You can consider it, because inside of that pool is where you are going to create nodes, and nodes are nothing but your virtual machines, and then you are going to have your jobs created, and each of those jobs can have little tasks. So what happens when an Azure batch is allocated to you, usually what happens is that you basically get a system. Okay. Every time you log into a batch account, you go to the pool, then you go to a node, and then you log into that node. You are basically logging to a virtual machine. How we used in our project, in one of our projects, what we did was, so we wanted to run certain Python scripts. Okay. And at that point the client said, okay, there's no point of running function apps and like deploying multiple apps and everything. They did not wanted us, because it's like if they would have deployed Python, if they would have deployed a function app for Python, they would have done it one time, and then for example we would require a code that we would have wanted to run, which was of Node.js or maybe some other language. We would have to again deploy a function app. So in our case, what the client did was they created a batch account for us. In that batch account, they gave us pools. They gave us, I think, 2 pools were given. Each of those 2 pools had 2 nodes, and we could run whatever we wanted to. In a batch account, usually how it happens is that it gets connected to a storage account. So your files are usually present in the storage account. You pick those files and you run via a job using the batch account. How we did was, we had our storage which was attached to the batch account. We had our Python code that was written in the storage account. We had stored it there, and we used to call it via Azure Data Factory. So in Azure Data Factory, if you go to custom activity, you can basically call a script or anything. So we provided the details. We said, okay, this is the batch account we want our this script to be running. So what internally would happen is that the batch account would say, okay, whenever it would get triggered, it would say, okay, this is the script that you want to run. Fine, this is the node that I have, which is a virtual machine. It would run that code in that virtual machine, give us the result, and that would be it. Okay. So if you have to understand batch accounts, you can understand it in a way. It is that It's basically internally it's a virtual machine getting allocated to you, but it's better when you have, you know, high performance computing that has to be done. In that cases, batch account becomes easier because it allows you to have it allows you to basically first dynamically adjust your resources. Okay, so you don't get full control of it, but it's more cloud optimized. And if you get in a sense, how you would understand is that, for example, you have a pool. Okay, you have a pool allocated and you have 2 nodes right now. You want more nodes to be it can get allocated to it faster. It's a one GUI interface where, okay, if you want to run a job, you can create a job, run a job on the Azure badge. You would want that, okay, I have 2 nodes, 2 pools that have been allocated. One of the pools I want Python to run, the another one I want JSON, like Java script, something to be run. I can do all of those. So it's more on a way where the infrastructure is not more important to you, but the platform of it is more important to you. Okay, understanding its components. Before we go into that, let's understand what are the activities that happens when Azure batch begins. Okay, so first of all, it does is that you create a pool, and once you create a pool, basically certain number of virtual machines get allocated to you. Okay, when virtual machines are allocated to you, the next step is that you do connect to your storage account, wherein you would be having your code of all of those things. And then so you have your code which is present in your storage account, you have your compute services, which are basically your pools and nodes, and then you can run as many jobs and as many tasks that you would want to run. And if there is a failure that happens in that particular job, you do get notified about it as well. Okay, understanding the components of it in the simplest of way, pool is basically it's the computing resources that are there. Okay, so it's basically a collection. It's what is a pool is going to say that, okay, I have a pool which has 5 nodes. It basically means that I have 5 virtual machines which are being controlled in this pool. Each of the nodes, which is a virtual machine, they ask you to enter a start task, and you can, update all the details that you want. So for example, you want to install Python in your virtual machine, you can just write down pip install Python in the start node, rerun it, and things like that. Okay, and then tasks are basically your individual units of work. There are certain things that we do consider when we are creating a batch account. The first one, which is related to pools, is that see, you don't want one pool of virtual machine to do everything, neither do you want one node of it to do all of it. Okay, so what we do is that we make sure that it is dynamically, whenever a job is run, the pools are allocated dynamically, so whichever one is running on lesser load is the one which gets allocated to run that thing. Then when you're creating a node inside a virtual machine, it's usually a good practice to have 2 to 3 nodes, because say for example, one of the nodes, so a node is basically virtual machine. I would tell you an example. What happened was, when we were running these Python scripts, right, what happened was we were running it only on one of the nodes. It was picking up that node in itself. So that node, whatever log files used to get generated, used to get stored in the in our virtual machine, which is in our node. And then the node, the virtual machine had certain capacity, right? It got filled and the node started failing. So what happened was, when it was failing, the second node started picking up. Although later on we went on, logged into that node, and we deleted the files that were in that node, but before that, at least we had a failover or a fallover, that if that node is not working, the other node can be considered. Okay, the third thing is related to a job, which is that it's better to have one job and have like multiple tasks in it, rather than creating a new job for a new task. This is also good in case of pool. So if you consider the hierarchy of it, it would say that, okay, don't create a new pool for every new job that you want to run. You can have multiple jobs running in the same pool, right, in the same node, in the same pool, or in the one pool, multiple nodes. And then in the same way, don't have one job created for every task. You can have multiple tasks created in under one job, and you can logically kind of club them and correlate them together. So if someone asks you what exactly is an Azure Batch is basically a platform as a service that Azure offers you. It takes off internally. It is going to be using virtual machines. It is going to use the storage account. But you don't have to worry so much about the infrastructure of it. Okay, the functioning of Azure Batch, how it happens is you have two things. Azure Batch is basically your controller. So you get a storage account, you also get a virtual machine. So that's your pool. You pick the application files, the data files, whatever you want from the storage account. You run whatever has to be run on those virtual machines, and then you get the result. Right? For example, if I want to run my website, I'd have my code in storage account. I would call that code from either Data Factory or from any of it, or maybe I would create a job in the batch account itself, and what it would do is it would take the code from storage account, run it on one of the virtual machines that are present, give me the results, and give it off. In that way, it provides you a better feasibility, in a sense that if one of the virtual machines fails, it can definitely go back to consider the next second node of it, and you can do a little bit more things with it. Say for example, if you have 100 jobs that you would want to run and you would want to control it, it's better performed using Azure Batch, because you can, if you have 100 jobs, you can create 100 tasks. Basically you can create, like 10-20 jobs, that 20 tasks a job, and then you can run them parallelly and get your things executed. So that is all about Azure Batch. It's a service that allows you to, instead of creating your own infrastructure, it allows you a platform wherein internally it is going to use compute nodes, which are your virtual machines, and internally it is going to use your storage account, but you can do a little bit more on your data and application side without worrying too much about the infrastructure. We would be creating a video wherein we will be creating a batch account, go into the details of what happens, why happens, but this is more of an introduction, and I hope it helps. Thank you.